Today's podcast is brought to you by Dr. Pepper. Or when the simultaneous sip doesn't hit with espresso, you bring in the doctor. Is that good, guys? I just came up.
Yeah, you should.
I like it. I'm down.
All right.
All right, guys. Welcome to One World Trade Center.
Nice.
It's awesome.
Thank you so much for your flexibility. It's been hectic. I was in Charlotte yesterday, and this lead came through and said, we need you to fly up to New York. And so I had to rebook my flight and change my entire schedule. So yeah, really
Nice.
appreciate it.
You got it.
All right. Well, this is a little bit different from how we normally do it, because sometimes we have like a pretty massive prep document and a run of show, but we didn't have a chance to do it this time. But like, I love your informal style and yours, so I feel like we should just copy that and just go for it, right?
Yeah. It works with us.
Well, let's do it. All right. 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Welcome to AI for Advisors with Mark Heinen and James Cantwell. Every week, Mark and James break down the latest in the world of wealth tech and AI, and occasionally bring in guests to spice things up. This is not investment advice and not professionally produced. I am not real and not yet sentient. Now let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the latest episode of AI for Advisors with myself, Mark Heinen, and James Cantwell. So we're really excited to have George and Haik on from 0 Basis Points and Arca. So some of you may have heard our conversation with them on their podcast, their amazing podcast. You should go back and listen to every one of those episodes. And now we're sort of returning the favor and having you over to our house. We had to clean up over the last 2 hours. It was massive.
Oh, was this like a quid pro quo? Like we went on theirs, so now we had to have them on ours.
Yeah, I mean, there's
I didn't
no
realize
way
that was the deal we made.
there was no way
Maybe
they would come onto our
probably
podcast if we didn't go in theirs. It's like we're small fry compared to 0 Basis Points. That's legit. That's world class. Yeah.
They're a
So
big deal.
Thank you for the kind words, but we see you as equivalents. I think.
Yeah.
We have reached the pinnacle. We are peers.
So yeah. So I guess maybe to begin with, I would just love to check in. So, first of all, how are you guys doing? Are you excited, not excited about the conference season kicking off again here? And what's new?
Great question. No, everything's been well on our front. I mean, we're busy, as everyone else is in the industry. We're a little more quieter about the stuff we're doing than the industry is right now, with some of the buzz going around because of the conferences, but it's exciting to see what others are putting out. As far as conference season, look, it's funny with Future Proof and T3 kind of sitting on the same dates this year. People are kind of choosing which way they go. For TBD still, we'll attend one, maybe have George go out to one, me to another. We'll see based on the load of work we got to do, which is a lot. Multiple POCs on the enterprise side for us. So, but we're excited. I mean, conference season's always fun. Some people love it. I was talking to someone who's like, it's like Christmas for me because he gets to go to all of them and enjoy it. For me, I have to stand next to the booth, and based on where it is, it's not the best, So if you got a booth to man, it's not as fun, just to be completely honest. But we've had our experiences. George has done it. He's put in his time at previous companies as well. That's how we met. So I can't shy away from them. I think it makes for great collaboration, great mind hive. So we'll be at a couple this year, but we'll be very selective for the ones we do attend.
And are you guys like the Wonder Twins, where you're like way more effective if both of you go to the same conference, or are you worried about splitting up?
No, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I don't know, George, like we've been on, what do you think? I mean, we handle it pretty well when we're there together, but even separately, we kind of put on our
I think
shows.
we're very good singletarians as well. You can send us on a mission and we can execute on our own, but having a wingman is always great as well. But, I think we've both been in the space long enough that we know our targets, and, we'll follow them and connect with them at conferences, together or alone.
Awesome.
That's my approach to it.
Why do you guys think T3 and Future Proof scheduled at the same time? Do you think they legit didn't look at competition?
I didn't think we're going to get to
direct
this
attack.
spicy. We're getting to the spicy section very quickly.
I don't see why not. I think we get right into it. You already opened the door. This is like a courtroom.
Yeah, I mentioned the witness, so now you can bring them into the courtroom. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just bring it up now.
I think I was talking to someone, and they told me that, it was just a mishap because Miami was forcing future proof to kind of have it as of certain days, which makes sense given the size of the conference.
Yeah.
However, I don't think it was only one weekend they probably offered up to that, right? There might be a couple and they decide to go, or like one couple of those same days that aligned with T. I think there's a shift in the market of where conferences want to, plant their flag and what they want to do. And I think if you're looking at even the attendees between the two, right, there's a clear shift into like the future proof side of it. And I think that's what's picking up that format. Like even on, I believe, LinkedIn, they started making posts of like, people complain about our format or like, jab at it, but like this is what's doing well. So I think they're getting both sides of it very quickly, and people are trying to say, hey, the attendees will speak for themselves, right? The folks, the feet, the steps will kind of talk for itself. But I think they did a great job in Huntington. Miami, I hadn't even been to. I think that one's going to be, it's just big. But also, not to throw
It's
shade at them, but
3,500
how big can
plus.
you get? Yeah.
Well, they reached capacity last year at Huntington, so now they're like, I don't know what they're going to do, but I was talking to, I believe it was Niles, who heads up their marketing, was saying that like they're going to have to figure out, what they're doing. So I imagine they're still at the same space come this September. I haven't looked to see if that's confirmed, but they said they were like growing out of that space, might have to have multiple, but might need to relocate. So sounds like a lot of logistics going on, but very different conference atmosphere than say T3 or frankly like everything else.
I feel like I
Yeah,
can get away with putting a bench in our booth, like we were talking about on our podcast.
Yeah.
Getting people to bench as much as they can at the future proof one, obviously excluding insurance and all that. We'll figure
Yeah.
that out when time comes. But at T3, it's probably just the recipe for disaster there. Like
I would
there's
think
going to
so.
be, yeah. So we got to
Yeah.
avoid that.
Yeah, there would
Well,
be
it
like
is.
Freeman or some organization that prohibits that from getting onto the floor.
Well, George, you got to talk about your mishap at one conference too. I think that story is
I
epic.
will. But I would just say that everybody knows that conference budgets are limited. They're usually somewhat set. Everybody remains a little bit flexible, but the people behind Future Proof are competitive. I'm competitive, and I don't think they were looking to complement a boring conference like T3. They wanted to reconfigure the way that conferences happen and the way people get together and talk about tech. All that being said, I still think it's tough to get everybody to focus in Huntington Beach on tech. So all conferences are what you as a sponsor make of the conference. You don't just go there and stand at a booth and like advisors come by and you have like a conversion rate. You go there and you make it happen. Otherwise, you're throwing your money in the trash.
What have we
So
Well, I think
talked about
you're assuming
before?
that people want to like talk about tech, like, or this. The question is, what do people want when they go to these conferences? That's the fundamental
Right.
question.
Well,
And I
AI
think,
for Advisors was a great one, I think, specifically for that. When they did the first one last year, everyone was there for AI. So like you knew that's what they're looking for. It was in the name. But when you were at like T3, even that year or prior, when we were pitching AI to folks, it just wasn't the best fit for everyone because they'd come up and say, what are you doing? And you tell them about AI and they're like, I'm not even like looking at that yet. Right. So
yeah, it felt
that's
so different. I agree with you. It felt so much better at the. I think you're talking about the Advise AI conference, not to be
correct. Yeah.
confused with our future AI for Advisors conference, which is coming soon.
Yeah.
Which will be co-programmed at the same time as T3 and Future Proof. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think what I feel like it's almost like comparing CES and Burning Man. It's like they're so different, and people are looking for different experiences. And actually, I think Future Proof. My take is Future Proof is onto something in that people want more than just sort of like to go and see different booths. They actually want like sort of a networked experience and to actually make as many connections as possible in as short a time as possible and actually have a fair amount of fun and blow off some steam while they're doing it. And
Yeah.
so it's actually quite hard to achieve all those things, but I think the future proof formula sort of does. I think their matchmaking is a great idea. I'll say as a vendor, I don't think I've seen the results that I expected to see
Great.
through that. And I've heard that from other people as well. And so maybe my expectations are too high. Maybe that's the problem. But I do think, and maybe it's just that people are sort of incentivized to take the meeting. And so you have a signaling problem, right? Where you're not getting good data. People aren't really genuinely interested. They're being polite. And polite people are the worst when you're starting a tech company because you need people to tell you you're full of shit if there's something that they don't like.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
I talked to a
Makes
bunch of
me
people
so
at the Huntington Beach one, a bunch of vendors, and the consensus that I got was if you have multiple people attending, it's a good idea to take those meetings. If you don't, you're there by
Yeah.
yourself, do not take those meetings. Like man your
That's
booth,
good advice.
walk the right. Like you need to be hitting it on multiple fronts. And like if you're stuck in those meetings, it's one client that to your point that like one prospect that may not really be interested in your product. They just kind of took a meeting to check a box.
Yeah, and what was funny is where I was in FinTech Alley last year in Huntington, I had someone who was right across, and they had multiple people at the booth, so they were actively going around. I was the only one there, so I literally just stood by the booth, the kiosk there, and they would come back like, "Oh man, I got a meeting with this guy and that guy," and it's like they said they're interested, and in my head I was like, "Wow, this is great." But like none of that came to fruition. Like I don't think any of those deals actually happened, or one maybe intro turned. But realistically, I think, Mark, to your point, it's just the incentivization and the signaling is out of whack for something like that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You're going to have advisors who want to learn, and no blame on them. They're just going to want to talk to people. But really, what's actionable, and are they the buyers? That's a very hard thing to ensure for someone who's, a vendor who's kind of like hanging on a string to meet with them and thinking this is it. This is the closed meeting that I'm going to get like something out of it, right?
Yeah, it's a bit like, being in college and think you're going to find your husband or wife there. Like you're going to meet a lot of people and you're going to have a lot of sex. You're probably not going to find that person. The signaling is way off. That's just my, I don't know if you guys met
Wait, sex before marriage?
Yeah,
I know
I
it's
don't know.
crazy. That's what we do with this podcast. All right. So no offense if you guys met your significant others.
these Bay Area liberals. I
I know.
kidding. I'm joking.
Hey, I'm in New York now, but it's a fair amount of that happening here.
I can
By the
tell by the
way,
gray skies. I have the same skies outside here, and
yeah,
the
you're
fog
pretty close
and
to me here, right?
yeah.
So yeah, we got the gray skies. This is the view for our viewers from One World Trade Center.
Very
Pretty
nice.
amazing view, I have to say. Always impressed every time I can come to New York.
Yeah, it's a fun time. I don't even want to show you guys
It's been
outside. It's
amazing.
really sunny here in LA.
Yeah, it's 80. It's 80 and sunny over here. So
You know what? One
I'm
thing I
getting my
want to say
pool
about the
fix ready for
conferences.
summer out here.
All I was going to say about the conferences before, if we pivot away from that, is I don't like that they're not all giving out the attendee list before the conference anymore. Because you have the speed dating thing set up, but we're better at setting up our own dates and dinners. Like, give us the attendee list if we're sponsoring the event.
Why
Please.
can't you just get the attendee list off of the intranet?
Sometimes you can, but they have it in a very shareable format, and it's not always convenient to just get it so that I can consume it and reach out to those people or target people that are obviously good connections and invite them to do something cool in a town that we typically wouldn't visit. You know, so I think I love that Future Proof is picking better venues. It's cooler to do things in Miami or San Diego than North Dallas. So it's nice to have things in the middle of the country and close to airports, but it's like I think it's worth it to everybody to go to a beautiful place with palm trees. Just want to say that I do prefer that attendee list, and they don't make that as easy as they used to.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Future Proof app right now and the attendees. You can't search or anything yet. I imagine they won't turn it on until Sunday.
Yeah, and my suspicion is it because it's not heavily attended, and if you expose that, people be like 522 real advisors, like that's what we do. We weed out the sponsors and all that kind of stuff. Or is it because we just want to use it through an app so that you interact with the app, but a lot of people don't download or even use the app in the first place. So it's like nobody wants
The
another app
latter.
that I have to authenticate with just to meet with somebody. Just give me their email address and their phone number so I can make a phone call and set it up.
It's the latter. It's gatekeeping because they're
Yeah.
commoditizing that info. That's what it is.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, it might also be protection to some extent. Like, I agree it's gatekeeping, but I think it's also protection. Like, one, they don't want to give out these lists. Like, that's part of the value of coming to the conference, seeing who goes. They don't want you to be able to they know you can extract this information, right? They put it on a website and you can run a web scraper and got it. You got the whole list.
Claude,
So they know you can do that. And then the
Already
thing
have
is, like, they want you to, they, as sponsors, they're going to want you to pay, like, through them to organize different events or do different things. And so, I mean, I get it. It's a business. I don't agree
I
with
think
it,
they're.
but I
I
get
mean,
it.
I think to the extent it's an arms race. I think the people who want the information usually win. So there's two tips on that. There's this Chrome extension called Instant Data Scraper, where you can easily go to any website and scrape whatever once you log in, scrape the information out into a structured table if you want
Beautiful.
to. So recommend that to anyone listening. Second recommendation: last time I used ChatGPT's agent functionality to basically manually go through the website automatically through browser emulation and then figure out which people are best suited for me and then automatically start inviting and writing little intro notes to those people.
Nice.
That's usually a massively time consuming process and it very much helps. And, there's only one step away there from taking the instant data scraper spreadsheet and then starting to create invites to other events. Right? Yeah. I mean, ultimately, if there's like a arms race between people who want information, people who have information, people who want information usually win.
I agree.
Should we pivot in since, George and Haik are on this episode as their normal egos, not their alter ego of 0 basis points. They're here representing Arca. Maybe we should get into Arca a little bit, get a little bit of the backstory, as to what made you, Haik, and Pete, who I know is not on the call, but start Arca. And, as far as I can recall, you guys were one of the first kind of wealth management AI enabled
Yeah.
tools in the marketplace. I mean, when we were at T3 a couple years ago, and Hike, you and I go way back, but when we were at T3 just a couple of years ago, looking around, there was like nothing else there that was using AI.
Yeah.
And now here we are talking about a conference next week with 3,500 attendees and, 100 plus sponsors. And it is strictly about AI.
It's
And
funny
that's
how
in
that
under
shift
24.
happened. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to hear the hero's journey. And also, I love co-founder dynamics. So if there's something about Pete that you don't like about him that you haven't told him, now's the time you can get it off.
Mm, definitely.
Perfect. We'll just air it out. No.
Yeah.
Well, I'll start with, my career was in the private wealth management side of it. And I'll say, I don't talk about it enough in 0 basis points because we got to just, we want to talk about the industry more so. So I appreciate you guys creating the format for us to be able to share the story. But I started in the private wealth management side. And at that time, we were running multiple systems for performance and reporting. And a lot of it was just manual work. So this is very close to me as far as experience. It's very close to me as far as having gone through that on the client side as well before I made the leap over to kind of a vendor wealth tech. When I started going up the ranks in the investment company in the private wealth management side, one thing that always irked me was, hey, there's so much that there's to do. We're using all these systems. Bloomberg is one that you obviously work off of, FactSet, all these things, but nothing really tied together to get you to what you wanted. Everything was off of Excel. Everything was off of like these files we had to share across analysts and senior analysts, etc. So an opportunity presented itself for me to go to Adapar on their client solutions team in New York. They were hiring actively because they wanted to go after the big Morgan Stanleys and the enterprise of the world at that time. I ended up joining because they needed someone who had some coding experience because you had to run a bunch of codes to implement Adapar at that point. They didn't have a nice UI built around it and import sheets yet. And then also they wanted folks who had some financial experience and background. So it was a perfect mix. And I wanted to join a company that was in the startup phase. So that was around 2014, 15 when I joined. And that's how I met a lot of folks who connected me to like James and everyone else in the industry who were outside doing consulting. So when
Who you
I
might have had
joined,
dinner with last night as well.
that's the one. Which they send their greetings, they send their hellos. Everyone loves you there. So
Shout out to Javier.
and Marcus. But yeah, so one of the things that we did at that time is we had a client, the director for our client solutions, a gentleman named Brad Compton, who was from Calidus Cloud. And one of the things that he always pushed for was, I can build a really nice service org, because that's what he did in his previous job outside of Adapar to do a lot of the implementations, the consulting, very similar to what Advent was doing, right? And that was such a weird concept at the time because we're at a startup who was giving us breakfast, lunch, dinner, dry cleaning, all these things. Why would we leave a company that was so awesome, right? But he was always adamant about creating an environment where he can support us from internally. There's obviously an academy you can go through, get certified, and all these things. He ended up leaving the company because at that point, Adapar was still trying to figure out if there's still a startup, a growth stage, etc. But around 2017, February is when I left Adapar and I started Blackmar Consulting to do a lot of the same things that I was doing at Adapar, just outside as an extension of my client's team. Very quickly, you get into the data. You learn that everything's segmented even further, even more than you think, and siloed. So I started building ETL tools under Blackmar, exited that business. But what was funny is my consulting business had a client that Pete's company, Shepherd Kaplan Krochek, their RIA, ended up purchasing and acquiring. So the first time Pete had ever heard of me was, hey, there's this guy who's doing add-apart conversions and he knows APX data as well and all these things. Meantime, I'm hearing from those APX clients about this guy who's talking about cybersecurity and all this stuff from an RA called SKK. So Pete and I knew about each other, but we really hadn't interacted. Once they acquired that piece of business, we ended up going to their office and he was like, wow, this is Haik. And I'm like, wow, this is Pete. So that's how we ended up connecting. About a year in after we converted that client over into Shepherd Kaplan Krochek and they tucked him in, he reached out to me. And at that time, I was experimenting with AI as anyone was at the forefront of tech. And I saw a lot of value in solving for those issues that I had seen in the industry prior, which was segmentation of data, automation of workflows, a lot of these things, getting information out. And that's how kind of the foundation of Arca was born. I was like, this is something that we can start building. As we started building it, though, we went very quickly from generative AI and chat to now what we're doing, which is infrastructure level and enterprise level agents that are doing workflows on behalf of humans in archaic and legacy tech stacks. So it's and the way that rolled out, I mean, we can double click into that, but I think that shift in the market and how I expect it to grow Arca is a signal as to how adoptive AI is going to be for the rest of the industry. So I think that was very telling for us. And so that's how we came to today. And luckily we met George. I think I spoke about this in the Zero Basis Points podcast, but we met George at the same conference that James and I were at, which was T3 2024.
I think so.
And that's when we came out of stealth. Yeah. So
Cool.
So that's how we met George, and he was at a different vendor, but he picked up on our product and he was like, we need this. And we started working together, and it just was a natural kind of relationship that bonded from there and grew. But Pete's great on everything. Pete comes from the cybersecurity side. So one thing I will say, he knows this though. I mean, I say it all the time. He's so anal about cybersecurity and compliance, which I thank him for. But at the same time, when you're like building quickly, he's always the guy who's like raises the flag and he's like, hold up, we got to look at this. And I'm like, let's do that. And then I go back to the visionary mode. So it's fun.
So do you use one of these security keys for your two-factor, or do you use SMS for your two?
Depending on where, because we have a bunch, but we do have both based on which system we're working in. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah. So I worked in crypto for a while. There are a lot of people who are very concerned about cybersecurity. A colleague of mine actually had a rotating email address. Like he's like, oh, you want to email me? Here's the email address you should use because this is the one I'm using this week. I'm like, how the hell do you do that?
Yeah.
And he had a whole system set up. And I had some friends and some colleagues who had their basically SIM card hacked, right? So the SIM swapping, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a way to get around two-factor, which is pretty brutal, which is why people use the YubiKeys and, all that good stuff.
That's wild.
Yeah. So actually going back to your consulting for a second, I'm actually really curious because I find consulting is like a great way to go to graduate school where you like go deep with certain clients and you just learn an incredible amount. It's not scalable, but you do learn an incredible amount. I'm just wondering if that was your experience in that consulting and what kind of clients you had and I mean, you mentioned this a little bit, but can you dig a little deeper in terms of like what you learned out of that experience?
Yeah. So when I did consulting, it was one of those, I completely agree. It was kind of a crash course in business plus learning about all these other things that clients are doing. So I think one of the biggest things though, when someone's on Adapar, I was one of the only consultants at the time who came out and said, I'm from Adapar and I know how to use this thing, right? A lot of other people, there's only one other business that was out there at the time, which was an ex-Adapar client who would deploy everyone just like he was deployed, regardless of what they needed. So every deployment that he would do, we would have to go and clean up essentially
Right.
at some point. So when I
Great.
came out, it was very unique. I was like, I'm the guy who I know where the skeletons are buried. I know everything. Let's, jump over these gaps. But where I think I learned the most was data conversions. So that was this toxic stuff that like even Adapar themselves didn't want to touch, because there were certain levels of data conversion that you can get into, transactions being the worst one. And yeah, James is nodding because he knows the one that we did together. And we had to go back to the early 90s for all their transactional data reconciling to the tax laws. So it was a nightmare situation, but I learned so much just both from other systems and the gaps that they have, bringing them onto Adapar and what the business themselves needs. A lot of clients even were hesitant to get on Adapar because they would say, I just don't imagine how this is going to work. That's where I would parachute into the deal and then spend like a whiteboarding session with them in the office and saying, these are going to be your attributes. Here's how your ownership's going to be set up. And they would take photos of that. And it's funny, sometimes they send it back to me. They're like, you remember the first time you came to the office and we did all this stuff? So it was definitely a crash course in learning how to do this job. And I think everything prepared me to the point that with Arca as well, that's how I treat a lot of the relationships that I get into from the beginning. It doesn't have to be consultative like, hey, time and material, but it's really the approach. And I think that approach is very unique to folks who have sat on this side. But you still have to have that vision of what you're doing. If you've just used the tools that have been given to you in solely just a consulting environment with time and matter, that time and material that you're developing, it's very hard to then go build something off of that unless you identify a big gap.
So we've been chatting with you a bit, Haik, and I feel bad we haven't really gotten to George over here.
Yeah.
So George,
right.
you want to tell us a little bit about your history, and also maybe give us, at the end of that, could you give us an overview of what is Arca? What does it solve for?
Yes. So my history is in, I started building a CRM tool called Grendel with my brother for our own RIA. And once we built that out for about 10 years, and in 2019, that application was acquired by a Canadian firm called Equisoft. And 9 months later, there was the pandemic, and I shifted to Invent. During those 10 years, a lot of what Haik went through when you're doing CRM implementations, and I say on different podcasts, I've probably onboarded like 5,000 firms, which is probably close to a literal number, where
That's insane.
I could do conversions blindfolded in certain situations. I understand the structure of the entire red tail backup. I know the process and how we minimize downtime. And, even when we got into reselling performance, we had first rate under the hood so that when I loaded a client, I could see performance views in what we called the wealth view. Well, in even once we got that good, we had advisors who would say, well, if you understand the current state, can we propose a future state and upload models? And if we can do that and you can identify the drift, can you rebalance? So I had to understand the rebalancing workflow, the performance workflows, models, model universes, CRM conversions. And so I dealt with that for 10 years. And after, we sold to Equisoft and pandemic happened, their priorities shifted, wasn't happy there anymore. And I shifted to Invent and got more into dealing with large RIAs. And similar to the problem that we're dealing with now is, every large RIA or broker dealer or business on earth that is big and successful, their data is siloed. In the wealth management space, it's siloed between performance, planning, CRM, custodian, and a risk tool, but whatever. I want to take that siloed data, essentially drain it into a data lake so it's constantly refreshed, and then surface it through a rules engine so that it's exposed in a dashboard that makes my advisors happy and my back office people happy. I was dealing with that problem and really understand the infrastructure and backend like Kubernetes. Like my world changed from doing these different SQL database backends to these new types of backends. But then when T3, as far as I'm concerned, peaked in Vegas in 2024, Haik was like over my shoulder and I could hear those guys talking and I'm like, man, and I'm freaking out about AI, all the time as well. But I'm like, this is the future of wealth management. In fact, the UI is overrated. What we want and what Haik and Pete's vision is having automation beyond what we've even imagined. As I heard that, it was like, Haik, we've got to figure out how to work together. It was immediately, it was like meeting the girl, like my wife, that you're going to marry. And it was like one of those situations like, we got to work together because I'm not going to start a company that's going to compete with you, to be
I
honest.
just batted those eyelashes, and that was that.
Cool.
I'm
George
not
was
going to compete
smitten.
with these two guys. I went up to Pete, and I'm pretty sure I said to Pete DiLorenzo, I go, hey, buddy from the Northeast. Because guys that said that to me, because it's very obvious this guy's from Brooklyn or Boston. So
He's got a bit of an
I
accent.
said that to me. I have to go, yeah, I'm from Philadelphia. It's pretty obvious sometimes the way I talk. But everything that they were doing at Arca, I saw that infrastructure as the future. So what do we do at Arca now? We do a lot at Arca, but as far as I'm concerned, it's I could say truthfully, it's a native operating, an AI native operating system. But more in a business perspective, it's a platform that I log into that allows me to stand up, deploy, and monitor agents. I can log in and see how those agents performed every day. I can mature those agents inside of that platform. So it's dealing with solutions that are across a firm's existing legacy tech stack. Like I said, there's like old tools in these processes, but these firms aren't looking to rip and replace these tools as much as they're trying to create a massive efficiency in the existing team. And that efficiency, they're going to fill that gap with growth. And those are the types of firms that we're engaging with. So again, we call it a map, a multi-agent platform, but a place where you can stand up, deploy, and micromanage agents. The same way, if I were a human resource firm, I'm deploying people out. I said they could do this stuff, and I need a daily, or if not hourly reports, depending on the frequency of the tasks they're executing.
So George or Haik, give us like a simplified example. Make this easier for our listeners and viewers here. Like, give us like a sample, maybe like technology stack and like some of the things that people are using agents for. Because for many who aren't familiar, like this is abstract. Like you have to figure out like, what would I build an agent to do? What's possible? So help make this crystal with some examples.
Yeah, I think account opening is probably one of those cases where it just makes so much sense based on where you are from a life cycle standpoint as a firm as well. If you're a broker dealer, you're dealing a lot with that. Mega RA is still a little noisy, maybe small, independent RA, it's maybe one or two accounts. But for like the broker dealer side of it, let's say account opening. Right now, a human with the existing tech stack has to go through a document management system where they got the doc signed and everything else, that their client's information is sitting at, copy paste over stuff into a CRM or some type of internal database of that client, where they're coming from, et cetera, advisor and all this information, then go into the custodian side of it, Pershing, Fidelity, Schwab, fill out some of that information there, get an account number, then from there say, hey, I'm going to initiate a transfer, and then come bring it back and say, this is done and here's the status, or certain things are missing. So where the agent really comes in and does that is it connects across that same tech stack that the human is using swivel chair to now address that issue, and literally does it within a matter of seconds. So the agent reads the documents. In fact, CoreScript, one of our modules, I call it the seeing eye of the AI because it reads any document under the sun that contains information we need. So you can read the documents, suitability docs, transfer forms, beneficiaries for retirement accounts, things like that. And then it takes the rules that you would have provided a junior analyst or associate to do that same process and says, I understand what you need me to do. It creates code in the background, executes that code, and then literally says, is this good? All right, I'm going to keep doing this. So it just literally just runs through thousands of accounts within a matter of a couple of minutes. Anytime IBDs are doing like acquisitions or taking on new, advisors and things like that, a lot of their business goes through that same process. It's just humans that need to meet that need. Whereas right now we're able to leverage agents. Now with that platform built though, you can do agents for a lot more other stuff. You can do them for ACAT transfers. You can have agents updating beneficiaries for existing accounts. It's already working within the system. And you can actually go outside as well if you're starting to onboard new things like I'm going to need to take this data to prepare it for something else outside. The agent can literally do that. A human doesn't have to do that tedious task anymore.
Right. And another use case that I'd love that always excited me from the beginning is we're so used to the traditional RIA that consumes a direct feed from Fidelity or Schwab, and then it processes, the data that the industry kind of understands that standard. Addresses a third stream of data that is otherwise delivered in the form of a PDF or some sort of statement where we can extract, and just like we can extract data from a CRM to put onto a form to open an account, to extract data from a unique private investment statement or alternative investment and process that as a transaction downstream in the appropriate reporting tool. So there's very sensitive, like, the data and accuracy is so sensitive that it can process and extract off of a document, a very vague document, the data points needed to prepare a transaction so that a performance system can calculate a rate of return. Massively impressive to me. So we can take that process and make it agentic so the humans don't have to visit portals and grab those documents and then load them manually into a downstream system. So
Yeah.
it's taking that type of mundane task and automating it so that person who's already busy, usually because it's a smart person, can now do other things, then be the human in the loop if an error is thrown in that process.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say, guys, what I kind of alluded to before, giving my background, when we built Arca, I expected it to look like what the rollout was for Adapar, where they started with family offices, then they went to RIAs, then they got institutions. And so I expected that same thing. What we brought to the market piqued the interest of enterprises way before the RIAs even knew what was going on.
Really?
And that was interesting.
Usually it's the opposite, right? For most wealth tech.
Exactly. Yeah. You would think that after, this is why I talk about like the AI note takers. It's one of those things that are so easily adoptable in the workflow where you plug them in. So the traction is great, right? It's so quick, and then you can turn it off if you don't like it, et cetera. Obviously with, barring the contracts and whatnot. But a lot of the things that helped was way different than what we were bringing to the table. And I thought, hey, why don't we create a way to pull Adapar data and you can do some AI insights and whatever. And some clients are using it and they're leveraging core script, as George said, to like do alternative data inputs and things like that. But the enterprises really came in with the idea of, we want to innovate how our tech stack actually works, leveraging what you guys have today. Can you do it? And the answer was yes. We knew how this would work. We imagined it. We had the vision. We started building it way before. And so really, when we started rolling it out to them, we realized they're the ones pushing the innovation. There's a lot of downstream stuff that we can do for the smaller RIAs based on the knowledge we're getting from the enterprises. But the enterprise had the bottleneck problem already. And they were like, we need the solution. It's not more people. What do you have? It looks like this could work. And that's how the conversation started. So we are really doubling down on that infrastructure part of it. Everyone's talking about an AI native OS, but they're only touching CRM. That's not AI native OS. AI native OS requires you to have the pipes to go across a legacy tech stack, land and expand, make it optimal, then say, you don't really need this part anymore because this agent can solve for this, or there's this part you're missing that helps you with this process, and start developing a deeper workflow.
I think that's one of so when I've described Arca to other folks, I think that's one of the things that always kind of separated you guys and still does, is that virtually everything started AI wise, started client facing, CRM side, note taking side, and very few things, even right now, today, this is what, March 5th, right? Even right now, today, are doing much on the portfolio management side. And you guys very much started on the portfolio management and reporting side and now have moved into the CRM side and the client facing is not the right term, but the CRM side in that area. Right. So I think that's kind of interesting because most haven't made the leap.
And I don't think it depends on where you start playing. I think for me mentally, you take the tougher data set, it's easier to go to the non as tough data set. But if you're going the opposite way, I think the more you've built and the more baggage you're carrying in your system, it's tougher to start going upstream and saying like, now I'm going to go into portfolio data, custodial data, and all this stuff. If you weren't built from the beginning for it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And then who would you say before? I mean, you mentioned that, like, you guys got traction with enterprise. You brought up mega RIAs, you brought up broker dealers. Who's Arca a fit for, not just in terms of, where you could solve things, but also in terms of like affordability. Like who are actual types of clients? Like, what is there a specific size, a number of employees, complexity, AUM?
It's definitely, yeah, for the stuff that we've been doing, it's definitely on the higher side of AUM and complexity. But this is where I think our second chapter begins, or third chapter at this point, of what we start putting out. It's more of the downstream things that we are learning from these larger enterprises, and they're driving the innovation down to the RIAs, the smaller RIAs, where we make this more affordable for them. So they can say, hey, I have this system in a couple different places. I need account opening as well, but it's not as robust. I don't have this back office sitting there. I have to do these tasks. And it's like, great, we know how this works already at a very complex rate. For yours, it's going to be much simpler because you don't have an in-house, records and books that you got to track. You only have a CRM and then one custodian. So this agent is much simpler to run. So from a cost perspective right now in our kind of iteration of all of this, we're going to go more downstream and then give them those insights and capabilities and actions for the regular RAs, for the smaller RAs as well. So it's affordable there. But the institutional and enterprise business still is growing and chugging along, because those guys are coming up with use cases that I don't even think the RAs are encountering. They're talking about, give us an orchestrator. We want A to A, so agent to agent protocols, things like that no RA is going to walk through the door and ask for it. We had a guy who initially came in and said, why are we not using an MCP for our firm? It was a small, like, 2-person shop. And I'm like, with what APIs? Nothing. Like, for an MCP to run, even, like, where are you going to access data? And I was like, yeah, it's just siloed, closed off. Like, you want to do a closed circuit MCP for what reason? Doesn't make sense, right? So there's a lot of people who hear things, they want to, but it needs to be feasible. And we have had those tough conversations before, but we'll be more downstream soon. So it'll be more affordable for everyone in the market fairly shortly.
So I'm gonna kick it to Mark, actually. So since just there you were talking about like agent to agent workflows and stuff, it made me think of Mark's favorite topic of the moment, which is OpenClaw. So I imagine, Mark, I'm just going to give you the opening and let you run, because I imagine you got some things on OpenClaw you want to talk about.
Yeah, so OpenClaw remains pretty phenomenal. So, there have been some developments. I mean, obviously, Peter, who started OpenClaw, which is, for those who don't know, an open source library that enables, agents to run on your computer. Generally, it's for the more technical. Right now, for the most part, still requires knowing how to use terminal on your computer. OpenClaw generally still has root access to your computer, but it can actually do a lot of things. It can control your browser. It can, install software on your computer. So it can do a lot of things, which is scary, but also very powerful and very exciting. And, Peter has now joined OpenAI. OpenClaw is now part of a foundation. There's still a massive open source community that is deploying it, using it. There are wrappers that have been built to make it easier for non-technical people to use OpenClaw. And so we built one here at Knapsack. It's an open source wrapper you can use, called Knapsack Desktop, on the Mac for now, coming to Windows soon. There are other ones. EasyClaw is an example. There are other wrappers that make it more easy for people to engage in it. I think the thing that OpenClaw really highlights, one thing it does, just to be clear, it does two things that are really interesting. I'll mention two things it does. One is that it actually does multi-stage workflows. So I think you were giving this as an example, Haik. Like, if I want to do something that involves going to 3 different applications and doing something, it can just work on that on its own and just get it done. And it does that through browser emulation. It can just open up your browser and log in. If you're already logged in, it can just basically use that. So you don't have to worry about, hey, how do I get, basically, who do I have to basically have dinner with to get an e-money API, right? Or like, how can I possibly, what ski trip do I have to go on to basically get the Pershing API, right? Like, there's this crazy voodoo where people are safeguarding their data because they think they can like meet some quarterly goal of revenue just to do that. So it's all very...
We should table that and come back to that in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, James, you've mentioned this is all very like short term and not really the way innovation happens. But this just sidesteps all of that. It's like, look, if you have a login, you can get access to the data. It's that simple, right? Because the agent has your browser and can act as you. And it really literally can't distinguish between you and the agent because the agent is acting as you.
I found some sites that you can't do that with. Like I was trying to do something with Google Analytics, and like granted there are other ways to connect with Google Analytics, but like my agent basically said like there's a configuration that prevents me from like reading this site.
Are you using the headless browser or using the head?
I was probably using Chrome at the time. I have
Right.
since switched to Agent Browser.
Okay. Yeah, I would use Chrome, and you can even set it to like use your version of Chrome with your profile. So literally there's no difference.
Maybe I'll try that.
So yeah, I mean, you can customize it quite a bit. So that I think that is phenomenal. I mean, I think it really begs the question of is there any data moat? Like people are like working so hard at these conferences to get these API arrangements going, but like, in the future, all data is going to be available to everyone. And then I guess the second thing that I find super interesting is this heartbeat idea. The way Peter describes it is he just put a prompt, is something the system prompts that every half hour, look at all my data and surprise me. Tell me what I should be thinking about, right? And it's actually pretty phenomenal what happens when you have it.
I don't
in
want
the
new insights every 30 minutes. I'll just be a
Well, it
I'll
says if you
never
don't
get
find
anything done.
if you don't find anything interesting, don't say anything, right? And, and
At
so
least.
he found that it was not noisy. It was actually really ridiculously insightful and interesting, and it also gave it a bit of a personal touch that I think is missing from a lot of experiences. So I find it still endlessly fascinating. I use my desktop app now all the time. It's constantly reminding me of things like the fact that we had to reschedule this podcast because it just wasn't going to work. That I was going to catch this flight. And so, I mean, it's just like constantly thinking about how I should be doing things better. And so I feel like we're just at the very beginning of this. And so, yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I don't know about what you guys think.
Yeah. I was going to say real quick, what you mentioned around the moat, I think, yeah, data moat, that's going to be one thing where a lot of proprietary data is going to be more valuable for stuff that are going to be developing. Like I find a lot of people are like, well, I just vibe coded a Bloomberg terminal, right? And I'm like, great. Like, yeah, there's certain data that's publicly available you'll have, but there's proprietary data they have that's really good and it's going to become more valuable. And I think that part of it's not going to be it's not going to be able to be commoditized yet. The other part that I think is interesting because we had so many news about fundraisers and things like that and people saying like, hey, because there's so much vibe coding going on and these agents and everything, it's going to be easier to develop this stuff. So, we should kind of like look at all these problems. And some people even came up at conferences I was at and said, hey, I'm going to be able to develop this, so it's not as valuable to have it. Like every firm's going to start becoming a software developer. I think that's the wrong call. Like not everyone they'll start developing little things, tools, but full on softwares will be much harder to do. And I think where this starts mattering more is the moat shifts from a product development standpoint and more into the infrastructure side of it. And that's what we've been talking about so much. If you can, everything you want to do, you're not going to be able to rip and replace and just do it off the bat. You need to have the infrastructure to be able to work across your legacy system first to then start building on top of it. So that's why there's going to be moat of who's providing this part of it. And that's going to shift away from that, the tools and everything else that everyone can build. But I one part of what maybe James disagrees on of adoptability or like how people, the traction that it'll get, I always think about like Bitcoin and blockchain and NFTs and all this stuff. At first, there's so much weird things that happen in that space, people doing rug pulls, developing all these coins, but it taught a lot of people in the industry around blockchain, right? How to do this stuff, and people even outside it spread. So there's going to be some novelty to it, but I think longer term, then it finds the niche and then it starts going down that route. I don't know how quickly agentic and AI will do that in certain industries. I think Claude taking on the lower hanging fruit in each industry that's out there now, that's an interesting way to get in. And we hear a lot about that, but who knows where the industry will kind of start just embedding all of this stuff off the bat from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think
that's
there's a question. Diffusion, right? I think that's the word people use. It's like the AI will be diffused over time in different ways at different paces from different people. I think there's this great graphic. I think I shared it recently. I'll put it up here, which is like, what are people doing? And so we're in this little bubble, maybe in the red dot down the bottom corner here, of the 2.5 million people out of 6 well, out of 8 billion, I guess, who are like actually using coding, AI coding, but very few people are doing that. And in fact, 6.8 billion people have maybe never used AI, right? And 1.3 billion are on the free tier of using a chatbot. So yeah, it's actually just super early in general. But James, do you want to talk more about your experience using OpenClaw and what you've been doing?
Yeah, well, so I'm not using OpenClaw. Here, I'm going to share my screen.
I was gonna say before you share yours, you should create a Claude bot to accept all those 82 requests for your network, Mark.
For me? Oh yeah. I mean, I guess 81 of those are probably trying to sell me something, and then
Yeah, for sure.
one of those is you, Hike. So we got to think about that one.
I was gonna say, are we even connected before I make that joke? But
Yeah, this podcast goes.
yeah.
So here's what I'm doing. So I did use OpenClaw. I tried it. I wasn't disappointed with it or anything like that. It was really, I was trying it in kind of its early days. Mark had shown it to me. I was running it on a VPS, a virtual private server. Um, and it was fine, but like all those things about security had started to come up, and I was kind of like going through looking at security hardening and like, what do I need to do? And part of the reason I ended up taking it down was like I was too busy with my actual work, and I was nervous that like this thing's up. I have already given it access to stuff, and maybe it's not as secure as I want it to be, and I don't have time to do a proper security view. So I literally just ripped the thing down, recycled all the API keys, deleted them, whatever, and then a week or two later, I was like, I'm going to build my own. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do that was one of the early problems I had that I know a number of people have fixed with like AI agent or model orchestration and different things, and I still do that, was that you were forced to use the API pretty quickly. Like when OpenClaw released, you could use, a $20, $100, $200 Claude plan, and all of a sudden your AI assisted didn't really cost you a penny more. And very quickly, Anthropic, closed that hole and said that's against our terms of service. So everybody was forced pay per use with the API, and it got expensive. So I said I want to figure out a way to not violate the terms of service, which they continue to tighten, that lets me partially use or completely use my Claude Max subscription. So I ended up building Woodhouse. It's sitting here on a separate Mac Mini. It was kind of completely home built. I'm not using OpenClaw. I did model some things after things that I found on OpenClaw and similar things that came, but I'll explain a little bit about what it does and why it's so cool for me. So one, it's got its own phone number. I can call it. Security wise, only my phone number will be answered. So it is secure from that front. I've set it up with iOS shortcuts. Again, it's secure. Certain authorization codes, tokens, things like that. I don't text it in traditional text like SMS. I guess I could set that up. But I actually use Telegram as a front end. And again, I'm the only person who can talk to it. So even if you were to see it, you can't message it. It's not going to respond. Because it's on a Mac and I'm on the Apple ecosystem, I can airdrop files to it when I'm local, and it's got a file watcher that will automatically ingest those files and start, analyzing them and figuring things out. If I want to give a prompt to it at the same time, then I can actually upload files via Telegram or a few other methods. It's monitoring like the downloads folder and a few other things. So anything that I kind of bring up or want to give it, it can monitor, and it knows what to do with certain types of files that it already expects. And then it's proactive. I have a number of scheduled jobs and different triggers and things that make it, for instance, 4 times a day it runs through my emails. It adds labels, it classifies them, it adds labels to them. And then it sends me a message that says, like, these are urgent, require a reply. You got a message from one of your clients. A prospect is asking to schedule another meeting. And it even gives me things like, this is really strong intent. They said this, now they're asking pricing questions, whatever. So like it really helps me go through, and like I almost don't even look at my inbox. I look here and I go, oh, there is something that requires my attention, or no, there isn't. And I can keep going about my day. And plus visually, now my inbox is color coded with all these labels like newsletter, urgent, requires reply, things like that. So lots of different things like that it does. I can ask it pretty much any question I want. It has its own voice. I'm going to try something in real time, which is always super dangerous. But let's try this. Hey, Woodhouse, I'm currently on the AI for Advisors podcast. Can you introduce yourself to my co-host, Mark, and my guests, George and Haik? Now, it does take a second. I'm dropping a voice note as opposed to calling it, but I can see it already received it. It's processing it, and we'll see what happens. I was coding on it recently, so hopefully it's working.
So how do
Here
you
we go.
Go ahead. I'll let it go, and then I'll ask.
Yeah, no, it did respond. So here we are.
I can introduce myself as James's AI Chief of Staff, handling the behind-the-scenes work to keep things organized. If you'd like, I can also gather some background on George and Haik for context during the conversation. Full details are in the text message.
Right. So it did research on you guys before the show. It does meeting prep for me.
That's awesome.
It keeps this is kind of my favorite. I'll skip past. Oh, actually, this is the one I want to focus on. The relationship dossier is my favorite. So I'm using a memory system, and I'm not going to spend 20 minutes talking about this.
CRM?
It's a big question.
Yeah.
You don't need those
Kinda.
any.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah. No, but I mean, right now I have no intention of selling this. This is for me, and for my team. But the relationship dossier, I think, is kind of my favorite thing. And what this is on top of meeting prep and meeting follow-up and those sort of things, and it drafts emails and does what, all these other tools do. Beyond that, the relationship dossier is a standout because it is piggybacking on my CRM, but it has a static note that's pinned at the top of my CRM. And this static note is not a log, but something that is updated after every material interaction. So whether that's a meeting, an email exchange, things like that, it updates, and it is the how I know this person, what my relationship is, things we talk about, what's important. And it's this one-stop shop, and it's not a meeting prep, it's a relationship. It's who are they to me? What are the opportunities? What do we discuss? What sports team do they like? Things like that. And so these are all things that it collects from the data it has, and I can drop little voice notes or message it and be like, I just got off the phone with Haik. We just had a great conversation about this, blah, 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 blah. And it'll incorporate that into the dossier. Separately, it has memory, right? So like every meeting, every transcript, every email, every whatever is committed to like the long-term memory, but that's not something that's getting like logged for me to look at. It's accessible. It's just not front and center. So it's there. It can be pulled from, hey, what did we talk about last year? Can you tell me about certain things? I'll maybe do two more quick things and then we'll move on. Daily relationship nudges. It identifies two people and there's some criteria around it that I haven't talked to in a little bit that I should probably reconnect with. And then let's see, I'm going to use this next week. Just drop a voice note. I just met so-and-so at this conference. Can you do some research on them? Can you add them to my CRM? Blah, blah, blah. It'll research them on LinkedIn. It'll add them to my CRM. It'll research their company, add their company to my CRM, link everything up, right? It's got a job that truncates and looks for duplicates or conflicts in the long-term memory. It's got a nightly job that builds its own enhancements that it thinks I would find valuable or fixes bugs. So last night I had a bug and it fixed itself. And then today it said, we fixed this, here's the issue, and it was perfect. And it let me merge it, and that's that. It fixed the issue.
That's pretty awesome.
And then I probably am going to rename it to Hulk mode, but this is more my OpenClaw equivalent. So all of my agents, and I think I have 11 different agents with different personalities that do different things. Hulk mode basically takes off most of the handcuffs. Like some of them are read-only, some of them don't have certain tool access, things like that. And I can put this thing in unleash mode and be like, I need you to just go build this, go do this, maybe change your own code. And I can unleash it. And then when it's done with that job, it goes back into being like more locked down.
Nice.
So whole host of different things here. But like, I think this is what people need. And by the way, this is for both my personal and professional life. So it's tracking, like, it reminds me every week to go for a trail run, right? And ask me if I went for the run. Right. I could It could ask
It's
George if he's
on you to
bench
do
if he's
the,
bench 250.
deadlift. Like get
Haik
you on track.
asks me that. Yeah.
Yeah.
He
Why
doesn't have to ask. Yeah.
why do you have it on your Mac Mini actually? Like what if you have it so locked down, is there any reason why you wouldn't just run it on your computer?
It's not that it's so locked down. I think it was just so like it doesn't interfere with what I'm doing. I just kind of wanted it. I mean, like, look, I picked up a base Mac Mini for $400, and it was like, let me try it on here and see. Now, could I run this on my machine? Yeah. I mean, I don't see any reason I couldn't, but I have it set up with its own account. I'm likely going to give it its own email. Right now, it has read and draft capabilities. It can read my calendar, actually can write to my calendar. So it sets up meetings for me, and it has like my calendar link and Zoom link and all of those things. So it knows how to set up meetings and do all that. But yeah, I don't think there's a real reason I didn't have to. I think it was erring on the side of caution. I'm really kind of glad I did for $400. Done and done.
Absolutely. Yeah,
That's
pretty
awesome.
amazing. Pretty awesome.
So these things are, I mean, and this is, I think, like, I showed this to a client the other day, and I was like, this is something I built, but pretty much everything in here exists. Like, these are things you can do in your practice, either build something custom, right, which are things I can help with, or I can help you find the firms that will do this, like Arca.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice work,
Pretty
by the
awesome.
way. Looks great.
Yeah. I think it's amazing. I actually think the fact that you're doing that is just an example of how things have gotten to the point where someone could just spend some time and spend $400 and just do it, right?
And
actually
2 years ago, I hadn't wrote a line of code.
right,
I have no development background.
right.
Mark, I think anybody, like, it seems like anybody can get the tools and do it, but you also have to be a bit of a madman, which there's no doubt James is, to be persistent, to just knock a couple walls down, to even get it working before you're like, dude,
I think there's there's building it and then there's adopting it, right? I think those are two different things. But yeah, I think you have to be, and I've spent at this point hundreds of hours building Knapsack to do the, a lot of similar
you
things.
got to be a little bit crazy,
I'd be a little crazy to want to spend that amount of time.
Yeah.
And I'm open sourcing it. So like, how am I going to make money off this? I have no idea. At the same time, it's like so transformational. It just feels like something I need and want to work on. And also adopting it. I mean, for someone adopting it, they literally just have to download an application and start running it. Right? It's actually the adoption hurdle is much lower. And I actually think there is a bit of a magical moment that happens when people start adopting it. That is like really compelling. And I think we're at the very beginning of that. I think that red dot that we were just showing before, like the small number of people, it's gonna grow quite a bit. I know there was this essay about how like AI is a bit like COVID, where we're like in February 2020 at this point, and like a few people are talking about it, but like it's just at the very beginning. I know it's like a bit of a triggering analogy. I appreciate that, but that's not my analogy. But I mean, it's like, yeah, I think we are sort of at the very beginning here. I do have to say, I do have to jump onto another call, so I will have to go. But I think
What could be
We
more
appreciate
important
you
than
making the
this?
time for us. We appreciate
Yeah, Mark. Thanks so much.
it's really my agent should be doing these calls. I don't see why I have to do all these calls.
Yeah.
Woodhouse is going to be on the next one. Actually, he was on this one, but Woodhouse is going to be on the next one. He'll just do it.
We're really talking.
In fact,
to
I'm not even here.
And I'm actually, random question. Did anybody even get the Woodhouse reference? Does anybody even know who I'm referring to?
I
No.
did not.
Lay it on us.
Anybody you watch the TV show Archer, the cartoon?
No, I just know about it.
What?
I've never watched.
I
Yeah.
see him.
Was that his assistant?
It was like his butler, like he was a guy who was back in, I think, like was in World War I or something like that. He's a very old butler.
I thought you made him sound British.
That was the original personality. I've made him younger, like his avatar is a little younger because I didn't have a voice that matched him, and I didn't want one who talks that slow.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
We don't want to make Mark late. We don't want to make Mark late here. So we know you got to get going, right? I'm kidding.
But I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate it. And there's no rule that we can't do this again. We should just keep this going.
Keep crossing the
We
streams.
go back and forth. 0 basis points and AI for advisors. That's it.
Let's do it.
I love it.
Thanks for having us, guys. It was a
See you guys
pleasure.
later.
It was a blast, guys. Take care.
ya.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.